So this is really important. If you're a freshman in college, somebody in high school, you're getting your first job, you've been working for a job for a while, you're looking to maybe interview for something that's a little bit more than just an entry-level job. This is gonna make the biggest difference between being a strong candidate with experience or somebody who is a smart person and knows what's going on. But if you do these things, what I've come to learn is that they completely ruin your experience and they can ruin yourself as a candidate for an interview. The way somebody interviews is very important because it's a skill set within itself. The information and the skill could be there, but if they're not able to present themselves at the time that's needed, it's going to make a really big difference whether you get the job or not. So, starting with the very first one, whatever you do not ask about time off, about getting time off in the future, or how to request time off. Now, it seems a little bit silly that I even mention it. Common sense usually, why would I want to even, mention that in an interview? You'd be surprised. In one of my very first interviews, actually, when I was interviewing a few years ago, it was actually a very large group interview for my retail job in Apple, about 40 people. And I can't really go into super specifics on what was being showed, but one of the other candidates that was fairly qualified, he was a college student, he was studying engineering, so he's a smart kid. He asked somebody at the table that was interviewing him about requesting time off. And it wasn't like a quick thing like, oh, do you guys get paid time off, as employees, asking about the benefits. He asked, oh, so if I need to work in late December, is that something I can get off? Don't do it in an interview, please. Now, the second skill set that sort of relates to it would be the second mistake that a lot of people make is you actually forget your skills. So, for example, I speak Spanish, and that's something, if you speak a different language, if you have a certain skill set, things like that, in a lot of different places, it's actually something that's valuable. If they have two candidates that are very close, and one of them speaks a different language, and one of them doesn't, that could be something that puts you over the line. Think about the skills that you have that match that specific job and try to focus on a certain number. So for example, 4 is usually a good number depending on how long the interview is. But if you're interviewing for a retail job and okay, well, I'm good at remembering things and here's why, I'm good on my feet, oh, and it's silly sometimes, so you'd be surprised, if it's a job that you have to be walking a lot back and forth, even simple things like, oh, I did cross country in high school, so I'm usually very fit and I really like and enjoy moving around a lot. You can kind of twist it a little bit to make it sound good without, BSing it and puffing it up. So that's something that you can definitely do. Make sure you remember that number and you keep that in your head and kind of repeat yourself when you're practicing before the interview. You repeat those in your head a few times so that way boom, like here's what I need to cover, so that way you don't forget it. Because there are a lot of times where you'll be going home and you're like, oh man, what, maybe I should have mentioned that. And it's gonna happen, it'll happen, but that's definitely a mistake that happens because at the end of the day, if you end up not getting the job, maybe if you would have mentioned it, you would have gotten. So it's always good to remember and make sure that you kind of rehearse it a little bit and keep the specifics in your mind without overwhelming your mind on everything that you need to know. Now, speaking a little bit of what you need to know and the way you pertain yourself, don't be fake. So that's the biggest thing. You can totally tell if you're interviewing or even if you're a candidate and you're sitting there and you kind of know, and I don't even need to give a specific example because you can always tell when there's that one person who's being super fake. People can tell. So a lot of times if you're interviewing a candidate, if somebody is very personable, they're very thorough, but they're also speaking with a normal tone of voice and they're not trying to, go very, very quickly and kind of, impress you with just the way they're speaking, you can tell right away if somebody's being fake or not. So that's something that you don't want to do, and make sure that you don't do that, because interviewers can tell if you're being fake, and you're probably not going to get the job if you are. Just be yourself. You know, that's why you're there. You're there to do the job. You're there to basically sell yourself. That's what the interview is. So just be yourself, enjoy it, try to show what you are good for, and if you don't get the job, you don't get the job. I have gone through so many interviews myself and not gotten a job. It's a very normal thing, and it actually helps you grow in the future. It's really good experience for other interviews at other jobs. So you're always going to find a place. Just make sure that you're being yourself, and you're not trying to pretend to be somebody that you're not in order to get that job. Because let's say it works and you get there the first day and they realize that you're somebody different, you know, you're already on the wrong foot. So that's not something that you want to do. Number 4, you do not want to give super long and windy answers, is the way a lot of times people say it. What you want to do is involve your interviewer and have them engage in dialect in order to add skills. So a lot of times if they ask a question, you know, a lot of times they ask broad questions to see how you behave. So for example, let's say again you're interviewing for a retail job. Let's say it's a sales job, you know, at any retail location, Target, Costco, anything like that. Picture it as just like your entry level. You're going to be, you know, maybe stocking some things in the back. You're going to be helping out customers. Something that they're going to just ask you is, you know, sometimes it can be as broad as, what are your strengths? That's a question that people ask a lot. You know, what are your strengths? Or they'll say, what do you do to want to help out a customer? You know, you can even re-ask, you know, oh, do you mean like that in a specific way, or do you mean generally? You know, and they will sometimes a little bit narrow it down for you. So you can ask questions in return that shows that you're engaged. Likewise, you can also narrow it down yourself. So you can say, oh, you know what, like a great example of that would be my ability to connect with people. So something that I really like to do with a lot of customers that come in is making sure that they're all being helped out. And something as simple, if I'm doing something like stocking a wall and a customer looks a little bit lost, you know, just mentioning, hey, do you need any help, will make their experience a lot better. That's an answer that I'm giving you right now. You can answer that question that way. You just narrowed it down a lot, and it's a good answer for that question. It shows that you have that attention to detail with the customer, and you don't have to go down a list and just say, oh, I'm really flexible, and oh, I'm really fast, and I know how to remember things, because it's good to show your skills, but usually you want to maybe show 1 or 2, and you want to give examples in that situation. So that would actually lead to the next one, is don't be vague. You want to be specific. You can use names, you can tell stories. Tell details. The more details you add, the more real it feels, and the more believable that you are, the more that interviewer gets pulled in to what you're saying. So like I mentioned just now, that example of, oh, how would you like to help customers? And you go, you know, if you have experience, telling little stories is great. You know, even if you remember a customer's name, that looks really, really good during an interview. You know, if you can kind of tell a story and tell about a customer's name, you know, say, oh, you know, I had a lady named Susan come in. She was an older lady. She was having issues and with a product that she recently purchased. She actually had bought, you know, so you work at a grocery store. She bought a pound of flour, and she realized when she was half of her, you know, on her way home that the bag had a hole in it. And we were actually able to take that, you know, and she wasn't very happy. We were able to turn that around, definitely get that bag from her, ask her if she needed anything else, get her a replacement, get that exchanged for her, and making sure that she was taken care of the entire time was the most important part of that situation, not the product itself. And it ended up being a good experience for that customer. Simple as that, you know? You gave a name, told a little bit of a story, showed what you learned from that story, you told it in about 30 seconds, and then you're good to go. You don't want to be too vague, because then, you know, it just shows that you might know the concepts, but even by telling a story, it absolutely shows your experience. It also shows that you're able to remember something, that you're able to learn from an experience, and not just work and get paid. And interviewers love to see that type of behavior. So that's definitely something you would want to do. And the next thing that definitely you don't want to do is, this would be number 6, you don't want to be clueless about a job. If you are clueless about a job, and I'm not talking about knowing everything about the company, knowing, you know, who the CEO is, it's always brownie points, but not necessarily that much in detail. But if you're applying for a certain job, you're expected to read the job description to know what those skills are when you're coming in. You know, a little bit about the company always helps, because then you can compare it with if you have experience to your previous experience. So if you're somebody you want to work retail, and you're very passionate about a brand, or if you want to work, you know, even in food, and you're very passionate about a certain company and you love their food, tell them that you love their food. You don't have to sit there and be fake and say, oh, you guys' food is the best, nobody's food compares, blah, blah, blah. You know, obviously you don't want to do that necessarily, unless that's what you feel, you know, and you can definitely say that. But if something as simple as, you know what, I love this burrito, you know, because I've just always enjoyed it, and the way the beans work really well with the totally natural cream that you guys put in the burrito, you know, it tastes so good, and I haven't been able to find that anywhere else. If you can just describe it like that, you don't have to say that it's the best thing in the world. If you just put a little bit of thought and detail into it, and you kind of tell what you feel, it will help you so much. And the last thing I will leave you guys with, the last tip I would say, this would be more so hopefully after you're offered your job. A lot of times what people don't realize is you have the ability to negotiate on pay, you know, and I'm not saying you have to be very careful at those situations. If it's a minimum wage job, a lot of times they won't, but if it's something that's a little bit above minimum, or even if it is a minimum wage, depending on which state you're in, a lot of times employers actually give leeway to negotiate. It could be $1 or $2 an hour. It could even be a little bit more. So if you have experience, you can definitely say, you know, you can, the thing that a lot of people don't realize when you're interviewing is, I learned this from a statistics professor, is a lot of companies, if they're smart when they're doing the interview process, you interview a candidate essentially if you're doing one at a time, and a lot of times they do maybe 1 or 2 at a time, but it's very linear. And you keep interviewing a candidate until you find the right one. That's how it works. You don't find one and then wait on it, keep interviewing more people. You don't interview 20 people, choose out 20 people, interview them all, and then narrow it down like some TV show or like a TV game show. You keep interviewing until you find the right person. So if they already invested enough time and they found you and they like you and they gave you an offer, a lot of times they're able to negotiate, you know, and you can say sometimes, let's say, you know, don't say $50 an hour or more if they're offering you $13 an hour. But if you say, hey, you know what, like based off of this and this and this, and, you know, maybe I speak an extra language, I have this experience, I would really love to take this job. If you guys would be able to maybe meet me at, you know, let's say they offer you 13, maybe if you can meet me at $15 an hour. I'm a student, you know, and definitely, you know, paying for my school is very important. That's what the money would be going towards. You don't have to go into that specific, but as long as you do it in sort of a humble way, but show your value, a lot of times, you know, maybe sometimes they'll meet you there, sometimes they will counteroffer and you'll get a little bit more than asking. Like I mentioned, be careful because you don't want to seem greedy, but as long as you are humble about it, and even explain, you can explain reason for it, sometimes it helps. You do in a lot of jobs have a little bit of wiggle room. So that's the last thing I wanted to leave you guys with. I know so many people that don't even give that a shot, you know, and at the end of the day, you're selling yourself. So if they offer you a job, it's because they see something in you and you are worth something to them. So don't just necessarily assume that, you know, whatever they offer you is there. A lot of even recruiters, people in charge of payroll will offer you a certain amount because they have to. But if you were to just ask for more, you know, it's not like that specific employee is coming out of their pocket. So a lot of times if they offer you a certain amount, you say, hey, like House here, it's their job to like, you know, they'll run it up the chain. They'll come back to you and say, hey, awesome, yeah, like we were able to get this, or, you know, maybe not, you just don't want to take it, you know, type of a thing. So it's not like you'll necessarily insult that person. And it'll definitely help you, you know, in the future, because then it kind of shows that you know how much you're worth. So with that, I'll leave you guys there. I'm also looking at making more videos in the future. If you do like this type of videos, I've been trying to share general experiences that I have. I've had a lot of people ask me for things like this, you know, oh, how does this work? How does this work? And I thought making a video would help a little bit. So definitely be sure if you want, you know, like and subscribe, all that fun stuff, and I will catch you guys in a video soon.